Alright everyone, today I feel one step closer to the primitive technology channel because of course you can tell the microphone is not all that at the moment. I don't know exactly what happened. I did a fresh reinstall of absolutely everything. It's probably Logitech's fault. The C920 interface does not work well with external microphones. We're going to figure it out. I'm thinking of a totally different recording situation, like investing in something that's a little bit easier, and I'm going to have a more stable setup soon. We got to talk about Buttigieg, who I know his name, I'm not pronouncing it right, but I don't care because Bud is funny in the context. Buttigieg is trotting out the same like tired white identitarian trope to attack Trump, like, oh, Trump represents the evil of white nationalism, and of course to Buttigieg, uniquely that is the most insipid form of identitarianism, as opposed to like black or some other form of nationalism. It's very interesting how that one particular facet is always reviled more, and it's like sort of a weird ritual, like a self-flagellation for certain politicians who happen to be white to like make sure that everyone knows, hey, by the way, I hate this one group of people more than other similar groups that have similar ideologies based on the color of their skin. It's like a weird ritual for them. It's like they have something to prove, and they're afraid of being called, I guess, a Nazi or insensitive or something. Like if you say all lives matter, that would piss these people off too. Remember back then, years and years ago at this point, where some people were like, hey, you know, all lives matter, so fucking leave each other alone. Oh my god, you're a racist. So Buttigieg is once again promoting the lie that Trump has anything to do with white nationalism. Meanwhile, if you're not in an echo chamber, if you're like me and you can actually communicate with different people who you don't agree with, and you actually talk to white nationalists, you'll realize that actually a lot of them hate Trump. They think he's a sellout. They're like, well, he didn't build the wall and he hasn't deported millions of people, so we don't like him anymore. They see him, they literally think of him as a cuck. They think of him as a deep state plan or something most of the time. Meanwhile, the people that are holding on with Trump, populist libertarians after a fashion, general conservatives, don't really have those views. I mean, the old style, like the Bush rhino-cons, those sort of people are the exact opposite of an ethno-nationalist. In fact, they do the same self-flagellation ritual too, and they mean it. They're not just doing it for scoring political points or political survival. They sit there and they weep and lament almost that white people exist sometime. You look at like Ted Cruz at the border and stuff like that. It's like they went in the opposite direction. They're the inverse of an ethno-nationalist. They're like, you know, ethnicity shouldn't exist, or it should exist, but it should be like, I don't even know what they believe in. It's difficult to tell at this point. Like every other year, what is right according to the progressives changes anyway, so keeping up with it's become impossible. That's fucking weird. But I mean, it's funny to see Buttigieg, who's a white male, ramble about how white nationalism specifically is like uniquely worse than all of the others. Like, so in other words, if you have two groups of people, they're ethno-nationalistic. One of them is comprised of Caucasians. The other is comprised of, you know, people who are black or of Japanese descent or something. Despite the fact that they could have the same exact economic and social ideology, the only difference is their race. One group is weighed as being considerably worse than the other, under some subjective standard applied by people like Buttigieg. Meanwhile, again, if you actually talk to people who have those views, I don't see, like, these people are about like right-wing extremism and stuff. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of so-called far-right violence and so forth in the country. It's just not particularly common. Like, it's a boogeyman that's been dreamed up for political reasons. The idea that Trump is even an ethno-nationalist is laughable. He's not even really a nativist. He's just a routine populist whose views were totally normal 15 years ago, even among Democrats. All of a sudden, because the Democrats largely have moved way out into left field, like post-Bernie Sanders, AOC-style post-progressivism, which is really regressivism, they're the only ones that have a problem with this issue. And what happened was the neocons, when they started doing that, they realized that it was a successful political strategy to morally browbeat their neocon opponents. The neocons took the bait and they said, oh my god, I'm sorry for being a white male. Trump refuses to participate in that sort of yearly self-flagellation, and all of a sudden that makes him a Nazi. Well, no, you can just be like me and be a libertarian, not really give a fuck about the issue, but I'm not going to feel sorry about the fact that I'm white. And I'm intelligent enough to understand that there's an equivalency between any white identitarian group and any identitarian group of any other race or ethnicity of people. It's the same fucking thing. And some of those groups, yes, will participate in violence, absolutely. Thankfully, it's largely absent. Thankfully, most of these people, they really just want to make YouTube videos, it seems. Okay, censorship is bad. Look, the alternative is way worse. The alternative is a bunch of billionaires censoring people, and most often they're not censoring the Identitarian anyway. They just censor some neocon that said the wrong thing one time. That's basically what's happening. Fuck the corporations. Buttigieg talking about Trump being a white nationalist, or rather, he promotes it or something. How? Exactly what has Trump said in years and years now of being candidate Trump and President Trump? Name one single thing in any objective sense that he said to give you the idea that he's an identitarian. You'll think for 1,000 years. No, I remember Trump standing next to Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson grinning and hanging out with Democratic politicians back in the 90s and being like he didn't give a fuck, and you know, he's not into that sort of stuff. He's a Manhattan socialite billionaire. He's not someone, he's not some Klan member, a shotgun toter from Alabama. No offense to anyone that is, I suppose, but that's just not the way that Trump is. The fact that he can play a caricature of someone like that and get people to take the bait and believe it is funny. And the thing is, like Buttigieg, I mean, he's trying to maintain relevance. He's ultimately a second-tier, only technically viable Democratic contender. He's in like 4th or 5th place, depending on which poll you consult. It's funny because between him and O'Rourke moving up, Harris has been shoved down arguably out of the top 5. That puts her out of the top quarter. It disqualifies her. She's no longer really viable. She's also losing steam. Sanders at some point will probably slip to 3rd. That'll be a funny day. It'd be funny if Biden's main opponent ends up being Beto O'Rourke, you know, the dirt eater, and then Buttigieg, who's openly gay. And that may not be a problem necessarily. Like, I don't give a fuck, but it's going to be a problem for some of those other particular working class Democrats. Will be like, oh, here's the Democratic Party abandoning Jesus again. And it'll be a big thing, and there'll probably be a bunch of fucking debate and shit. White nationalism. What the fuck has Trump ever said to make you think he's a white nationalist? The white nationalists don't even think he's a civic nationalist. They think that he's a neocon at this point because he's not. He doesn't want to round up every minority in the country and like make them, you know, miniaturized ethno-states or something. Depending on which identitarian you ask, of course, you can get 5 or 6 different variants of what you should do. There's like the Tara McCarthy give people an incentive thing. There's the Richard Spencer create a micro-state within a state, you know, like a black ethno-state out of like turn into Georgia and Alabama or something like that. You have other people that are like, no, it should be, you know, basically force people out back to whatever nation is imagined to be their ethnic origin mainly. And so they can't agree on that. Trump's never proposed any of those things. All Trump wants to do is lower your taxes. Look, if Trump is such a horrible Nazi, why is he standing up against censorship and against disarming civilians and against taking all of people's money and trying to create peace in Korea and shit like that? He's a really, really weird fascist. And all these terms get blurred together anyway. Ethno-nationalist, fascist, totalitarian, identity. They don't even know what most of these terms mean. The Democrats are clueless. And Buttigieg sitting there rambling about the same bullshit for several years that's been rambled about. Trump's support has never wavered as a result of false claims of him being some sort of ethno-fascist. It's never going to happen because intelligent people see through it. It's going to be a weird totalitarian dictatorship, one where everyone's really well armed, pays less, and can say whatever the fuck they want on the internet. That's a weird dictatorship if ever I saw one. Meanwhile, I could look at a bunch of left-wing regimes in Europe that right now are trying to ruin the internet and disarm people over here and everywhere else in the world, make everyone fucking miserable and impoverished. So that's a funny thing. It's also funny how Trump's approval is one of the highest in the Western world, despite the fact that supposedly he's on his last leg politically and everyone hates him and he's terrible. He's got small hands, he's ignorant, he's demented, he's a Nazi, he's hateful and spiteful and bigoted. That's funny because he's got 45% support right now. Really, really funny. That's about all. Peace out.